All right, we are live this morning. Pastor Johnson over in Manila, Iowa, and good morning to people over in Manning as well as Manila. And we are taking another trip down south to St. Louis, Missouri. And when I got on, I had to give my friend Lawton Thompson a hard time, because when I knew him, he was like hair up here, but nothing here. So it's like seeing Grizzly Adams now. But
gravity has taken effect. It stopped growing here and started growing here.
I think I'm slowly having some of those issues, but I can't grow a beard for the life of me, so I'm in trouble. Lawton, we're very happy to have you with us. And where are you at right now specifically?
So I'm in the city of St. Louis. I'm actually at St. Trinity Lutheran Church here in the far south end of the city of St. Louis.
Okay. And we are talking to you this morning. And really quick, if anybody's watching and you have any questions, please put them in the comment box. Lawton, you are currently going to seminary in St. Louis, but Concordia Seminary. And you kind of have an interesting backstory, because so how I did it is I went to seminary and went on an internship, and then was sent to the same place where you lived. But then you ended up serving as a pastor as a part of a program called the Specific Ministry. Is it pastor or program? I can't remember.
Specific Ministry Pastor Program.
Okay. So you are a pastor, but didn't technically have your Master's of Divinity. And currently that's what you're working on receiving. Is that right?
That's correct. Yeah. I served my home congregation in Florida, where you guys vicared, you and Tiffany vicared at and interned at.
Yeah.
And it was a wonderful experience there. But God kind of said, "Hey, I think that you guys should pursue this a little bit further." And so Here we are. We landed in St. Louis for a couple of years to finish out the Master of Divinity degree.
And before all this, what was your job? What were you doing?
So I was bivocational in the ministry. When I graduated high school, I became a firefighter in our hometown, and so that was what put food on the table.
Sure.
And I volunteered with the youth group, and so I did that. And then for the last few years of that, I also was in the Specific Ministry Pastor Program. So I served both in the church as a vicar and then as a pastor, and then also in the community as a firefighter. And so I did that for a while, retiring this past June of 2020.
Sure. And when it comes to being the Specific Ministry Program, you have a specific kind of focus. What was your kind of focus when you were there?
Yeah, so you get kind of general pastor training from the seminary, but then you're also required to attend some more specifically focused training of your choosing for whatever your congregation is calling you to. And so my specific ministry was school ministry. I had the blessing of my office being in our Lutheran day school, and so I kind of always joked that I had the best gig there, because I got to hang out with the parents. I got to hang out with the students. I spent a lot of my time, in the mornings early prepping for chapel or sermons on Sunday. But then I would be in the lunchroom on the playground, hanging out, playing soccer with the kids or whatever, listening to them tell me about what was going on in their lives. And through those kids, it was wonderful. I found out a lot about what was going on, so I could reach out to mom or dad and say, "Hey, just wanted to call and check in on you." But I had to really being a pastor in a school is a really cool job.
Cool. So you're at seminary now, and so when you go to like college or something like that, there's different departments. So maybe you have like the biology department, the history department, math department. Does seminary have any sort of equivalent sort of department system?
Yeah, so there's different departments there, kind of on the different areas of study. There's the practical department, which is focused a lot on the practical aspects of ministry, things like pastoral counseling. What are some of the ways to manage a congregation? How do you lead a congregation, practically speaking? There's the systematics department, which talks a lot about that's the systems, kind of the doctrines. What is it that we teach and believe about Scripture? God reveals himself to us in the Bible. There's a lot of stuff there. how do we all understand that we believe the same thing about it? And that's systematics. Then the exegetical department is kind of, it's about looking at the text and interpreting and reading it. How do I read the Bible and understand what it's saying? And then that would obviously feed into the systematics department kind of in that way. And then there's historical theology. And so that's the history of the church, the history of the Bible. I mean, things like you take classes on Reformation or church history, things like that. So kind of gives you a well-rounded approach to not only the scriptures, but what we believe as Lutherans, as well as how did the church come to be through time. And with all of those things in mind, how do I serve God's people best wherever he sends me to serve at? How do I bring all this stuff that they've put in my head and actually apply that into the lives of the people that are sitting in the pews and that are living in the community around that church?
Sure. And I think that's a credit to our sort of circle, our denomination, is just the focus on, we take the Bible seriously. Maybe we should take ourselves as individuals a little less seriously, but we take the Bible, we take God very seriously. And we spend a lot of time, a lot of resources and energy on that. I think that's cool and very needed for our culture and time. Now, that all said, do you kind of have a favorite department or focus?
I think my unique approach to going through the MDiv, I think when I get done, I'll spend a total of 7 years in seminary. So I'm kind of taking the long road. Early on, I really enjoyed kind of both the historical theology and the exegetical theology. I really liked to peel apart these kind of units of thought in the scripture where we say, okay, what's Matthew saying here? What's Paul saying here? My undergraduate's in history. So when we start talking about church history, and why did we disagree about this, or what was this about? I love that. But the further along I get, the more appreciation I have for the systematics, for, okay, we have all these things that we believe, but why is it that we believe them, and how do they fit together to support what our confession of faith is, what we say we believe? And so I think if you were to ask me today, I'd say right now I really am growing to really enjoy systematics, and I'm making the Book of Concord regular in my daily readings because I'm just fascinated because of the history that's contained in there too. So for my history brain, I'm like, oh, okay, this is why things like the Smalcald articles are here and why they matter. So systematics for me right now is I've grown to appreciate something early on that confused me. Like the first time I sat in Dr. Okamoto's class and he was talking and I'm like, I don't know what he's saying. Yes. Like you get out of class and you're like, oh man, I am never going to figure this out. But now I really appreciate it. And so I'm trying to understand it in a way that I can unpack it, describe it, and speak that into the lives of the people in the congregation better so that they can understand that also.
And I appreciate what you said, just the importance of history. And the more and more I've been doing this ministry thing is you realize that we are not the first people to endure the stuff that we see, I guess. And for instance, the other day we had questions about election and things like predestination. Is God say some go to hell, some don't? And then I was able to go back to like a document like the book the Book of Concord, and it's like, oh, there's already answers. Christians have already thought about this. I'm not, this isn't anything novel. And there's just something really cool that we get to connect with Christians from the past, and they inform us of how and what it means to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And it guides us. It helps us as a guide to looking at God's word and then turning around and saying, okay, we may face some things that look new, because obviously they didn't have the internet back in 1530. But it's not the first time we've dealt with these questions of, of doctrine and teaching and practice and what God's word is telling us. And so, yeah, love it.
Yeah. And it's not only the challenges Christians have faced, but also the creativeness as in the ingenuity. So something I can think of is one of the reasons why Luther was so popular and well read is things like the innovation of the press or the printing press.
Yes.
And right now, throughout COVID, one of the things we've been able to, in some ways, innovate. There's definitely challenges, but ways we've been able to communicate God's truth with people is using things like the internet. So there's obviously challenges that Christians have faced and we can learn from them, but also ways we can say, oh, wow, well, that's what we're going to do too.
Yeah, it's God works in mysterious ways and ways that we thought, 10 years ago were like, oh, that's crazy. And today we're going like, all right, going live in 3, 2, 1, go.
So you go to seminary. What does a typical day look like for you?
So a typical day, it looks for me like I wake up early. I am a morning person. So this morning I was up at 4 a.m. and I was sitting at the table and I was working through systematic stuff. Actually, I spent a couple hours doing that before everybody else gets up. Have breakfast. I have 2 teenagers, so get them off to school and then head out the door. And on a day like today, Monday, I'll come to work here at St. Trinity first, and then I'll go to class. And classes, the seminary has been very careful to ensure the safety of the students so that we can continue to meet in person. We've had, after Thanksgiving break and for Winterim, we were online. But other than that, we've been in person, which has been really nice. And so that's meant class sizes are a little bit smaller. We're meeting in larger rooms. Like there's an auditorium on campus that we can meet in if we have a larger class. But we sit in these lectures, and most of the lectures are, there's a lot more dialogue than just straight lecture, which is really helpful. The professors do a great job as we sit in that class, because they're about an hour and a half each, of presenting information and then encouraging a response. So we read a lot of material before we go into the lecture so that we can be at least partially informed about what we're going to hear. And then what we hear from the professors really gives us, some food for thought, and we can kind of have a dialogue with the professor and with the other students in that class to talk about what we learn, what we're hearing, because they are the experts in the field, and so we can kind of flesh out maybe some of those things we aren't quite clear on before leaving class. But it's really there's a lot of there's a lot of that. My days look like that a lot. Either I'll start my day there and end here, or I start my day here and end there. And then the evening time, I have some designated reading time after the kids, are going to bed or doing homework or whatever, so that I can kind of keep in that. I'm really blessed to have a job where I can spend time listening to sermons and podcasts. So I still get my personal kind of devotional time in, being able to, I'm here working, and so I'll put in my headphones and I'll listen to an audio Bible, and then I'll listen to a sermon and kind of then spend some time thinking about that and kind of chewing on that for a while, so that I'm not neglecting also, my own personal spiritual development for just studying and writing papers on faith and doctrine, because that personal time is so important still in the midst of all this time. You're studying the Bible, you're in the Bible, I'm translating the Greek text into English, and this is wonderful, but it's still a very different approach when it's an assignment versus versus something you're doing that's developing you spiritually, personally. So that's kind of what a day looks like. So I hate to say it, but it's actually really nice.
Well, it is a master's program. So ballpark, how many pages a week are you think you're reading, assigned reading?
This semester is pretty intense. Now, I should say because of my SMP time, I have fewer courses a semester than I would if I had just come straight through the MDiv program. But I would say, I mean, of theological text, I'm still probably going through on a short week at least 300 to 350 pages of text. So pretty significant, not as much as some of my counterparts here. Other weeks it can be really thick. I mean, it can be 500 or 600 pages periodically, but that's not the norm. And it just depends. Sometimes last week was a shorter week of reading, but the material was really dense. And so even though like there was one document we read that was, I think, 47 pages long, which doesn't seem all that long, but it's one of those ones where you read a page and you have to kind of read it and go back and read it again and go, okay, what are they saying here?
Sometimes there's reading and it feels like it's the kind of reading where you're pulling like 10 bowling balls behind you when you go through it.
Yes. Yeah. I do a lot of highlighting and noting in the margins. I like to read on Kindle for that very reason. I prefer to have a book, but for studying, it's a little bit easier for me to be able to highlight as I'm going and go back and say, okay, I read this. And it confused me. Now, did this make any more sense, or am I still confused?
Tiffany and I always used to joke because obviously she took classes too, and often she would highlight, and sometimes it'd be a really good read, and she'd be highlighting maybe like 80% of the page. I'm like, well, then what's the point if you're going to highlight it all? It doesn't stand out anymore. So you have two boys and a missus. What's the missus up to?
She, so my wife is a Lutheran school teacher, and she was a school teacher at our day school back in Florida. And when we decided, yeah, God is leading us to St. Louis, we kind of just put our feelers out. She came up with me and visited. They toured a bunch of schools because my younger son's still in middle school, so we were figuring out which Lutheran day school is he going to go to. My older one's in high school. And so they visited a bunch of schools, and she just kind of at the same time said to the principals, hey, just so you know, my husband's coming to seminary. I'm a Lutheran school teacher. And, if you have a call, then I would love to consider that call. So she kind of cast a wide net, just to, because you don't know where God's going to put you at. And she was blessed to receive a call to teach at Word of Life Lutheran School, which is in the city over here, not too far from where I'm at right now, at Ascension Lutheran Church. It's actually an association of churches that support Word of Life, Timothy Lutheran, Ascension Lutheran, and St. Lucas. And so she teaches first grade there, having a great year. It's a new challenge. She has taught fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and seventh grade. I mean, third grade, fourth grade, sixth grade, and seventh grade prior to this. So first grade was a new challenge, but she's enjoying it. It's a really cool school, very diverse. They're involved with this group called Christian Friends of New Americans, and so they have 10 different nations represented by the immigrant families within their school. So there's a very diverse and just family school. I mean, they've wrapped her up, and she's really loved serving there. And my son Jonathan, who is in school there in seventh grade,
if I remember correctly.
Go ahead. I was just saying, my son.
Sorry, didn't.
I was just saying, my son Jonathan has thoroughly enjoyed that. He's enjoyed being in school there. The kids have been welcoming to him. He's made new friends. In fact, when we first said we were going to leave Florida, he was not a fan of it. And so he said, well, fine, if we're only going to be in St. Louis 2 years, I'm not making any friends. And lo and behold, within like the first 3 days, he's like, oh man, I got good friends here.
Go figure.
Yes.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, churches like St. Timothy are really active with these immigrant communities and providing housing. Because if you imagine coming over from places like Africa, how do you start?
Right.
So these congregations are doing a great job of creating homes.
You're absolutely right. They're helping these families that have come to the country and speak little or no English in a lot of cases, especially, I mean, they do have a lot of families from different countries in Africa. And so languages are very unfamiliar to us, helping them find housing and work and helping facilitate this Lutheran education for their kids.
Sure.
So really cool. Awesome to be here and to kind of witness what's going on with that.
And it's super cool because, I mean, we were in their shoes at one point. We were the German immigrants, and we were English speaking. So it's neat to see us sort of take the mantle of hospitality and doing that.
Yeah.
The last piece I had for you is, so when you're at seminary, it's not like you just go to a random church or something like that on Sunday morning, but you are typically assigned to a congregation to help serve there, and you can preach and learn and give the pastor a break on a weekend. And so tell us about that. How does that work?
So typically when you arrive at seminary, it's called an RFE congregation, resident field education, kind of an on-the-job training as you're beginning to learn about what it means to lead liturgy. And, because gosh, liturgy seems so simple when you're sitting in the pews. And then when you go to lead it the first time, I can remember writing on my bulletin, okay, stand, sit, say this. Because I'm like, well, I have to remember a lot of things. And I've been watching this service my whole life. Yeah. Turn and face the altar here. And so you get assigned there, and you're required to work 10 hours a week at your RFE congregation. And, initially for like the very opening semesters, it's not very intense because you're still brand new at this whole thing. But as you take worship classes and homiletics classes, that's the fancy church word for how we preach.
Sure.
Then you start getting integrated into leading worship, leading Bible study, things like that. And so that kind of gradually increases through your first and second year until you head out on vicarage. The interesting and unique thing for myself is being an SMP pastor. I was already ordained. I already met all my vicarage requirements. So when I came here, they said, you don't have an RFE requirement. So you're just here completing academic requirements. But I don't sit still well. and I didn't come to seminary the first time to rest on my laurels. I really want to be learning and growing while I'm serving God's people. And so about a year before we came, one of the teachers at our Lutheran day school, her really good friend from college back when she was in college, is a DCE up here in St. Louis, and her husband's a pastor. And they visited our church, our home church in Florida, because, I mean, in January, what do you do when you live in the Midwest? You come to Florida where it's sunny and warm. And so we met and we hit it off right away. It was completely organic. I had no idea. At that point, I'm like, well, we'll figure it out when we get there. But God led us to be connected. And so I got a job here as a custodian at St. Trinity, which was wonderful. And that quickly, with the pandemic, turned into working with the high school youth here in the neighborhood, and then into sharing in some preaching duties, which right now I'm preaching every other week through Easter. So, even though I don't have an RFE congregation, God has planted us, very, very lovingly and firmly in this congregation in South City. And it's wonderful because it's an entirely different type of ministry that I've ever been involved in. So I'm learning about a whole new aspect, a whole new view of doing ministry. I'm coming from a more suburban setting and large congregation to an urban, smaller congregation, and seeing how this congregation is reaching into the community around them, loving their neighbors. It's pretty amazing. And so I actually am. I don't have a RFE requirement, but boy, I tell you what, I am learning and growing tremendously through this opportunity here in the city right now.
Good. Yeah, and like you said, I mean, Oviedo, or kind of outside Orlando, is different from St. Louis, and St. Louis is different from kind of rural Iowa. So there's all these different dynamics that come together. And for those watching, really quick, the reason why the seminary can shoot all these workers all over the places. You can't throw a rock without hitting a Lutheran Church Missouri Synod congregation in the city of St. Louis.
Yes. So, oh my gosh. Yeah. If I drive from here in 5 minutes, I can hit 3 other Lutheran congregations to the north and northwest from where I'm sitting at right now. Like I
believe it.
They're everywhere.
Well, good. Lawton, we really appreciate your time this morning. Really quick, we've got some people saying good morning. We've got Connie saying good morning. Annette and Paige have been watching. Doug says good morning. Karen says good morning. And Betty, as faithfully as always, gives us prayer hands. So we appreciate your time this morning. And everybody watching, thank you. And Pastor Connor will be joining you for the rest of the week. And don't forget, Wednesday we have worship either at Zion at 5:45 right after confirmation, or Trinity, and dinner at 5:30 and worship at 6:30. So thank you everybody for joining us. Have a good one.